to Everyday Greatness, and thanks for joining us. We're coming to you live from the Randwick Club, a sensational community venue in Sydney's eastern suburbs. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands these interviews are taking place on, the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders, past and present. This series of Everyday Greatness, we're going to be exploring the transformative power of sport and the importance of inclusion. I'll be chatting to champions in disability, First Nations and LGBTQIA+ inclusion. Today, I'd like to welcome Jarred Hodges from the Sydney Swans Football Club. Jarred is a Gwamu man. He's the head of First Nations football at the Swans. Jarred's been instrumental in creating pathways for young First Nations children to play Aussie rules across New South Wales. Through the ARA First Nations Foundation, Jarred has been helping create pathways for young First Nations kids to play sport, especially Aussie rules, across New South Wales, and he's changing the landscape. Jarred Hodges joins me now. Jarred, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Manish, for having me.
So as a Gwamu man yourself, how has your heritage played into how you shaped the First Nations Foundation at the Swans?
Yeah, so I guess firstly, our country sits in southwest Queensland, so the borders are St George and Cunnamulla, and there's a little town called Bollen, which is where my family lived on the reserve. I always talk about my nens and my family's I guess living situation, and their bed was the red earth, and their house was flattened kerosene tins tied together. So really humble beginnings, but what was really strong was culture. And so I guess for me, culture is at the centre of what we do. It was interesting earlier today to hear you speak, and I heard the Governor speak around really strong values. That's the centre of what First Nations people and communities are about. It's respect, it's watch and listen. We'll constantly, as little fellas, clipped over the ears, you stand there but don't speak, and so you would observe and you would listen around what was appropriate and what was inappropriate, and I guess I've just held those values strong to who I am today and where I go, and it's always front and centre around respect, and I guess the other big one for me, which is a real community value, is this notion of shared leadership. For First Nations people and culture, we work in circles. We don't work in hierarchy. The only hierarchical position is if you're fortunate enough to be an elder, of which you earn that position because you have knowledge, experience, and so we work from circles. But when you enter that circle, it comes with responsibility and accountability. So those values, I think stand the test of time and are really relevant in our modern society. And I think for First Nations people, or for our two worlds to come together, I think it's those aligned values is the starting point of where we need to meet. Respect, listen. But most importantly, let's just work together.
Very cool answer. You mentioned the Governor-General there. So one of the things that stood out for me when I interviewed her in Admiralty House, she's got a big Indigenous dot painting in the hallway when you first walk in. And I said, that's interesting. Was that always here or did you put it in? She said, the first thing that used to be there was this head and shoulders picture of Captain James Cook. When she walked in, she looked at it and went, Adam Goods and Michael O'Loughlin wouldn't feel welcome coming in here. I've got to respect them and I'm going to change it. So she's got this free pass to grab whatever she wants from the National Gallery. Went down there, got this huge dot painting, big welcome to country painting in the foyer of Admiralty House. So you talk about the two different cultures coming together. I think it is under her leadership. It's very cool.
It's interesting you say that because I'd been to Admiralty House under our former governor, and you speak about belonging and connection. And as soon as I stepped in, I saw that image, and then I looked. There was a vase actually. There was a vase as well, and the picture on the vase was, I guess, the the colony, and it was ancient. You know, it was the particular dress and headwear, and there was a flag, and then there was it depicted First Nations bodies on the ground, and that's what was there at the time. So it's interesting you bring that up.
Talk about being welcoming and respectful. So what does First Nations inclusion mean to you in the context of Australian sport?
Well, I think in 2025, it's actually sad that we've got to actually talk about inclusion, and that it's just not natural and part of what we do. You know, we're a nation, you know, that celebrates its diversity, but yet for us as First Nations people, and I think it's been exacerbated post the referendum, but you know, it's really challenging. Our communities, you know, myself, but the youth in particular that I work with are finding it really challenging, you know, to walk freely and safely in our own lands without ridicule, without stereotypes, and so we've got a long way to go as a nation in healing.
Very true. Couldn't agree more. So tell me, let's get to footy. Tell me about the First Nations Foundation. What are its core objectives, and how did it come into fruition?
Yep. Core objectives, which is I think what we're all here about. It's simply about access and opportunity. We know in Sydney and New South Wales relatively, AFL is fairly new, and so for a lot of our communities, they haven't always had, again, that access and opportunity to participate and play the game. I grew up in Western Sydney, and I remember I was only probably about 12. I remember when these 4 funny posts went up, and community pulled them down, and they put them up again, the council, and they got pulled down again. There was a real turf war. If we look at our private schools throughout Sydney, again, you know, rugby's prominent. There's a turf war, and that's denied people access and opportunity. So when I first arrived with the Swans just on 4.5 years ago, first thing that was being celebrated was the QBE Swans Academy, and so it was a natural question to say, well, how many First Nations players do they have? Because they were really proud and I guess boisterous around the fact that the QBE Swans Academy had 700 participants, of which there was only 7 at the time. And so I know, and because of my lived experience, that the Swans catchment, which goes from Coffs Harbour down to Shellharbour, I know there's a large First Nations representative there, and I didn't think that number represented what was in our catchment. So it was then about getting to work, creating a program that ultimately, a couple of things, provide access and opportunity, but it did that in a culturally safe way. And probably the big one for me, you know, might upset some executives in elite sport, but I think elite sport has taken over the landscape too much. And for me, the first thing that I say to our kids and our families is this program's for everyone. So if you've got 2 left feet, this is for you. And if you kick it like Buddy Franklin, this program's for you.
So that brings me to the next question. How does cultural inclusion, the stuff you're talking about, the educating people on who they are and where they come from and be proud to be an Indigenous First Nations person, how does that help you get into the Sydney Swan, do the Sydney Swans list and win games of footy?
Well, I think inclusion, but society starts and stops with connection and belonging. And, you know, since the colony, our people, our communities haven't always felt a sense of belonging in society. So the first thing we do is we really highlight through cultural practices that you are special. We see you, you are special, you have talents, and we're here to support you. And so that's probably the lead thing that our program does. I spoke to a family today, and they said their kids do a lot of sports, and they said there's no program that they've found in any sport that provides, I guess, such a foundation of care and support. So that's number one. We want our kids to feel that they belong and they can be proud of who they are. And that's not always the case. You know, in our first year, we had a 9-year-old girl who, tell the story. We have a cultural day, so we'll go for 6 weeks before Christmas. In our last gathering, we won't touch a football. We'll just immerse ourselves in culture. And we were up on Biripi country at the Lands Council. This 9-year-old girl was running around. She was laughing like a kookaburra. It was the most beautiful, innocent, sweet thing. She went away and annoyed someone else. Her mum come over crying and said, "Jarred, I don't know what you're doing, what you guys do, but please keep doing it, because that's the first time in 6 months we've heard our girl laugh." She's had some abhorrent racism to her, to the point where she doesn't feel comfortable in herself. She didn't want her skin colour. The family had to cover all the mirrors in her house, and we had a 9-year-old girl talking about suicide. And that was the extent of the impact of some of those social, historical and political, determinants. And so that young girl now, through our program, is a school vice captain or house captain, is proud of who she is now, and is comfortable in getting up on the assembly and giving acknowledgements and welcome to country. And that stuff really makes me proud. As much as we're looking for, we want to support aspirational athletes, I think the greatest gift that our program's giving is it's giving a sense of humanity, a sense of power to these youth who haven't felt that they've got that power.
It's very powerful. So inclusion in life is way more important than inclusion in just sport, just getting a kick. So how does it make you feel, saying all that the numbers of First Nations players in the AFL has dropped pretty dramatically over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's disappointing, because I think most importantly it's disappointing for the game and for our countries, because our First people have brought so much joy, entertainment, flavour to our sports in our country. You know, I'm old enough to remember Kathy Freeman and that night in 2000 to really garner and bring everyone together. You look at, obviously, at the Swans with Michael O'Loughlin, Adam Goods, Lewis Jetta, Buddy Franklin, but right across the board, some of our greatest sporting moments as a nation has actually been our First people. And so when you talk about the numbers dropping, it's a concern, because people are going to miss out. Like, not only do our athletes inspire the next generation, we also bring clubs, bring communities, society together with, unbelievable skills that just, it's mesmerising, and you scratch your head, how good. So I think as we go along, I think all sporting codes, that the importance of diversity just cannot be lost, because that's what brings people through the gates. That's what gets bums on seats. That's what ultimately grows a sport, and our First people, have those skills and assets to do that. And so it should be embraced, and from a junior level or youth level, bringing them into the game needs to be a focus, because we are less as a nation, and you're less, I believe, as a sporting organisation when you don't have First Nations players.
I totally agree with you, and that's a very powerful thing to say. So I know a lot of white people think that success has to be tangibly measurable. If you're going to call something good, you have to show X, Y, and Z as to why. How do you measure success in the First Nations Foundation?
That's a great question. I think I'll go back to the old MasterCard commercials when they used to say it's priceless, and so it is hard to measure, because our program as I said earlier, is a program for all. So, we have a variety of measures. First and foremost, individual social and emotional well-being is our priority. First Nations people, youth, have the highest rates of suicide in the world, and so we've got to start there. We've got to make a difference to those numbers, and so through the social and emotional work that we do, we build the individuals up. So let's make stronger and prouder people from the inside out. So there's a human element. Then we have the other end of the spectrum then is around those aspirational players, because we do want and need to ultimately cultivate our own First Nations talent. And so our academy, our mainstream academy, has gone from 7 out of 700 in 3 years, now has over 90 First Nations athletes. Due to the work that we've done over a period of time. So by providing this safe, supportive, cultural doorway for our kids to walk through, they're then moving through to the next room feeling strong, proud, and able to show their true talents, and that's being identified. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's so many, impacts that we need to measure when we're talking about success of a program. But if we're looking from a talent perspective, I'm sure everyone agrees that to go from 7 to 90 in 3 years is an amazing thing. And in 3 weeks' time, we're actually taking a boys and girls team. So we'll take 44 youth on a tour to Alice Springs and Uluru to continue their personal and cultural development as well as their physical development.
Very cool. Yeah, I agree. So why do the Sydney Swans Football Club feel so passionately about inclusion for First Nations people in society more than just in sport?
I think the legacy of people, as I said earlier, of Michael, Adam, Lewis, before them, your Derek Kickett's, a young fellow who played a number of games, had a badly broken leg, Jamie Lawson. I think when people reflect at our club, I think they see the value that our first people have brought both on and off the field. And so we are really proud of our history with First Nations people. You've got strong leaders, Michael O'Loughlin currently on the board, following his successful playing career, is now impacting off the field. So I think leadership from him, from Adam, and to Tom and to Andrew Pridham, and probably those before him. But in my time, to Tom and Andrew, their support of making our club equal, and again we come back to that word inclusive. It's just a really strong value that we hold close to our hearts.
Now, I'm very interested to ask you this as a First Nations man. When you ask white people to give advice to young people making their way in football, they're all about wake up earlier, work harder, eat better. What's your advice to young First Nations people wanting to be included in Australian football?
I think the most important thing in anyone's life is your identity. So first and foremost, the knowledge of who you are. And so doing the work to actually know who you are sets you up, in a strong position to be able to handle the rigours, the stresses, the pressures that come with being an athlete or being a leader, being successful in any field. And I think if you look at anyone who's had success, who is successful, they're really strong in their identity. And so for me, it's supporting our young people who sometimes, because of the historical, social and political determinants, they're not sure who they are. I remember as a young fella, as 10 years of age, you're First Nations. Well, hang on, you've got society's stereotype that of what a First Nations person looks like, and it's very dark. And then I'm looking in the mirror and, geez, that's not me. And so as a young man growing up, it was challenging to reconcile with who I was, but it was through sport and through the sport of rugby that really supported me. And then from that moment when I really celebrated and knew who I was, it gave me a really strong foundation that it didn't matter what come at me. I just felt connected and felt strong. So I think success starts with identity and supporting people on their journey of discovery of who they are, strengths, weaknesses. I think that's important.
Jarred Hodges, thank you for joining me on Everyday Greatness. I love being an Australian. I love this country we live in, and you just made me feel prouder of being Australian. We're all in this together, and we're all working as hard as we can to help each other through it. So it's a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Barnaby. Can I just say two things? Firstly, our culture is our culture. Our First People is everyone's culture, and I just encourage everyone to become inquisitive and connect, because it can make us so much stronger individually as a nation. And the other thank you I want to say, and thank you to ARA Group, and I know they're a sponsor of the work you do. Our work wouldn't be possible without the financial backing and support of ARA, and so they are making a huge contribution, not only financially but importantly, they're making a huge impact on the youth coming through. So I do want to thank them. Thank you.
Very good. Couldn't agree more. I also want to thank the ARA Group for being our major sponsor for the 10th year in a row. I want to thank the Randwick Club for hosting us in this spectacular venue. I want to thank Julie Watson from Stronger Than My Excuses for your production work on this series, to Zach Libdy and Dynamic Media for all of your technical work. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope we've helped make you feel proud again of just being an everyday Joe bag of donuts. I hope you can join us next week, where I speak to Gabby Costanzo from the Flying Bats, the world's biggest LGBTQIA+ club in the world. Gabby and I are going to talk about the challenges she faces with stereotypes and how important inclusion is at her club. I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, if you'd like to find out more about Everyday Greatness, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, and subscribe and watch. Thank you again for joining me.